The madness, it rolls on. Welcome into the Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things college hoops, WNBA. We're going to get to some of that in a weird twist of fates during today's program. Unrivaled and oh so much more. Mia O'Brien joined as I am each and every week by the one and only Mitchell Northam of SB Nation. Mitch, just for the listeners who may be watching on YouTube, listening on YouTube, or if you're listening as you're driving around, maybe driving to Tampa for the Final Four, Mitch is currently, as we're recording, in Birmingham after covering the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, driving to God's country in Tallahassee tonight before finally landing at the Final Four, Amalie Arena, Tampa, Florida. That is why, if it looks like he's in a holding cell, he has a good reason why. I'm just at 1010XL headquarters, and I'm in our backup podcast studio. So I have no excuse. You have all the excuses in the world, as you are a man on the road, Mitch.
Yes, I'm logging the miles this week and talking about Olivia miles. And there's just a lot of miles going on right now in my life. So, yes, we are in Birmingham, where my hotel has surprisingly, impressively, like really good homemade biscuits, which has been a great surprise every morning as part of the continental breakfast. So shout out to the Home 2 Sweets here for coming in clutch with the real solid biscuits.
I'm sure producer Dimitri will be overjoyed to hear that his home state has shown you some home cooking. Speaking of 1,000 miles, if I could fall into the sky, do you think time would pass me by? Speaking of time, time has certainly flown by when it comes to our Her of the Week. Hailey Van Lith becomes the first college basketball player, men or women, to guide 3 different programs to the Elite Eight. Of course, also guided Louisville to the Final Four in her sophomore season. It's the ultimate redemption arc story, Mitch. This is a player who, for lack of a better term, became one of the most polarizing players in sports because she made a deal with the devil. She pulled the Kevin Durant. She goes to form the super team in LSU. Ultimately, the weird braided hair parallels between her and Kim Mulkey. Kim Mulkey tries to make her more of a passing first point guard. I watched the clips. I listened to the interviews last night, but I'm excited to hear from you about being there in the room when Hailey Van Lith described the worst year in her life and what Mark Campbell and TCU have been able to do for her and what she's been able to do for them, bringing them to heights previously unseen in program history.
Yeah, I really thought Hailey Van Lith was the main character of the Sweet 16 Elite Eight weekend. It started with her being very upfront in talking about the mental health struggles that she had sort of gone through during the end of her time at Louisville and during her time at LSU. I think, like you said, I think she went to LSU to chip chase. I think she went there to go win a national championship, and it didn't work out. There were too many personalities, too much drama. There's Angel Reese, there's Anissa Morrow, there's Flau'jae Johnson, and there's Hailey Van Lith, and there's only one ball, right? And then there's the Kim Mulkey of it all, right? So it was, I think, a bad fit for her from not only a basketball perspective, but also a culture perspective. And when she went into the portal last summer, she was just in search of a better fit. And it seems to me like she really found that at TCU with Mark Campbell and with all the other players there. And it seems like everything has really worked out in her favor this year, not only from that mental health sort of culture perspective that she needed, but also from a basketball perspective. Like, you look at her numbers this year and they're really career best for her across the board. Also a career high in assists. I mean, averaging north of 5 assists per game this year. So, someone asked Mark Campbell after the loss to Texas, like, hey, are you going to retire Hailey Van Lith's number? And it's a valid question because while she's only been there for one season, she's taken TCU to places they have never been before. They had never won a Big 12 title. They had never been to a Sweet 16. They had never been to an Elite Eight. On the court, from a basketball perspective, she became the main character for me when she absolutely gutted Notre Dame in the fourth quarter of that Sweet 16 game. Knocking down that dagger three-pointer to cap off a 14-5 run, and then twisting the knife again a little bit later when she hits a layup in traffic. I just thought, and in that game where you have Hannah Hidalgo, you have Sonia Citron, you have Olivia Miles, Hailey Van Lith was the best player on the floor. And that really struck me. And, talking to her after the game, she was like, that's my goal when I play against other good guards. I want to be the best player on the floor. And I don't think there's any debate as to who was the best player on the floor in that game. She was also like bleeding. She had scratches all over her arm, bleeding from her knee.
Kurt Schilling game is what I called it watching it in real time. It was the Kurt Schilling game.
Yeah, she told me and some other reporters afterwards, I'm all bandaged up. I kind of feel like a badass. And she played like one too. She was awesome. The fourth quarter numbers I think really speak to her ability to take over the game and Notre Dame's ability to shrink away from the moment. So Miles, Hidalgo, Citron in the fourth quarter combined 1 of 13 from the field. Haley Van Lith 4 of 7. And made 2 3-pointers. So, that's your game. And Haley Van Lith, yeah, like I said, not only with her comments that I thought she was very candid and honest in a lot of those press conferences, talking about all those struggles and stuff, but then backing it up with her play on the court. Really, I think the main character and the player of the weekend. And I think it's a run that we're going to remember for a while.
Haley Van Lith finishes her college career the Big 12 Player of the Year, Newcomer of the Year, Most Outstanding Player, 3-time All-Conference selection, and yes, led TCU to its first regular season conference title, conference tournament title, first tournament appearance since 2010. There is an argument to be made, to your point, Mitch, that perhaps they retire the number 10 in Fort Worth. I'm going to call an audible here because it seems like the most easy transition given the breaking news of Monday night. In this week's starting 5, we have the situation in Notre Dame as number 4. But given your reporting and some other folks reporting, the fact that Mark Campbell may be going from longtime associate head coach and, for lack of a better term, Sabrina Ionescu's buddy, to now being the bag man, being the transfer portal minor in women's college basketball, for me, that deserves number 1 in the starting 5 rotation as we continue today's program. Give us the very latest. The breaking news, of course, in case you missed it last night, folks, on Monday night, Shams of ESPN, Charania, reporting that Olivia Miles, projected to go number 2 in the WNBA draft, the longtime Notre Dame Fighting Irish point guard, has announced that she is foregoing the WNBA draft, instead entering the transfer portal, and the rumored frontrunner for her services is none other than Mark Campbell and TCU. What just happened in the last 24 hours, Mitch?
So first, I have let me just get this complaint off my chest. I
know it's coming. I'm very excited.
I want people in power in women's basketball to figure out how to start a new cycle. Like we went through this on Selection Sunday, where we had a WNBA trade announced, like as the third region of the bracket was being shown. Hey, people who run the WNBA and women's college basketball, a lot of the people who cover one of these sports also covers the other sport. Like you have to know these things. You could have waited until Monday. Nothing was going on Monday. Monday night in Birmingham, I'm sitting in the arena, sitting on press row, glance at Twitter. Olivia Miles tweet from Shams Charania. She intends to enter the transfer portal per sources and is going to transfer. Just to let people know how the sausage is made a little bit, I have a pretty good idea that this was an agent, working with Shams, saying, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, and leaking this to Shams. Why are we doing this in the middle of an Elite Eight game? A lot of people told me that it was because, it's the clock for the WNBA draft. No, folks. Olivia Miles didn't have to declare for the draft until today if she was going to enter the draft, not yesterday. So there was no clock, no timeline she was really bumping up against on Monday night. This was just poor execution, I feel like, by the folks who decided to leak this news out. Like, why are you doing this in the middle of an Elite Eight game? Also, why are you leaking this news to an NBA reporter? There are so many people who cover women's college basketball. I'm not even necessarily mad that I didn't get the scoop. It's whatever. But like, I have so many other.
Like Alexa works at ESPN.
Alexa Philippou.
Mark Vopel works at ESPN. Like,
right?
What are we doing?
Michael Vopel. Whoever. There's so many people. My friend Howard Megdal. Whoever. Talia Goodman. There's so many people who cover women's college basketball.
Malika Andrews' sister.
Yes, yeah, we could go on and on and
Kendra.
on, right? I don't really understand why this news was given to an NBA reporter. I don't understand why it was leaked in the middle of an Elite Eight game.
Shams also, and granted, I mean, I think he's located, maybe he's in LA. I thought he was in New York. He also was the first who had the news that Juju had torn her ACL. So maybe this is a play by the higher ups at the mothership up in Connecticut and Bristol, where they say, well, we are going to grow the game of women's basketball by having our most high-profile newsbreaker since Adrian Wojnarowski went back to his alma mater at St. Bonaventure, with all due respect to Adam Schefter, and they're going to have him break it because that signifies this is a big deal to the casual basketball fan.
Yeah, I
don't agree with it either. I agree with you, but that's all I can come away from it with.
Yeah, I don't know if it was an ESPN decision or if it was just the person who works for Olivia Miles' agency deciding, I'm going to give this to Shams. But anyway, so those were my big complaints about how the news got out on Twitter on Monday night. I think we should be a little bit more mindful of like when we're breaking the news and how we're breaking the news. And I point to this all the time. The NFL has really perfected this. They know how to eventize breaking news and to keep you talking about the sport over and over and over again and all the time. Why couldn't the Olivia Miles news come out right now as we're talking?
We're recording this podcast
on Tuesday morning. Nothing would have changed. Like, it wouldn't have impacted her timeline or anything like that. And she didn't, as I reported last night, did not officially enter the transfer portal last night. So it wasn't a situation where a coach at insert school brought up the portal and saw Olivia Miles' name pop up on the spreadsheet. This was someone leaking some information to Shams about, hey, this is what she intends to do. And it's since been confirmed by some other reporters that, she does intend to enter the transfer portal and forgo the WNBA draft. So we can kind of pivot to that point now, just kind of big picture, sort of what this means for Olivia Miles, Notre Dame, the WNBA draft, the whole thing. In Birmingham, it seemed apparent to me, especially in the fourth quarter of that loss to TCU, that Olivia Miles looked like someone who was tired of playing with Hannah Hidalgo. That is just me reading some body language and reading some tea leaves. And I think you look at how Notre Dame's regular season finished. You look at Olivia Miles's numbers in a lot of those games, and they did not really match the same sort of efficiency and production that she was putting up earlier in the season. We've talked about before how it took Niele Ivey over an hour to show up to 2 press conferences after Notre Dame lost at home to Florida State and then in the ACC tournament to Duke. Again, as I've previously made this point, you do not need to have hour-long post-game meetings immediately after a loss if there is not something bigger going on in your locker room. And I think that towards the end of the season, we don't know what happened yet. Maybe we'll find out at some point, but something broke in that locker room. Did NC State break Notre Dame in that double overtime loss? I don't know. But something went wrong somewhere along the way in that locker room. And I thought it was kind of interesting, this pivot that Olivia has made from losing that game, I guess, on Saturday to her decision apparently on Monday night. Because after the game on Saturday, she was telling some reporters in the locker room, some Notre Dame beat writers I saw, that basically she thought that she had outgrown college. Now, maybe she just meant that she had outgrown Notre Dame. Because it seems like she's going to play another year of college basketball, which she is entitled to do, and which I'm very excited to see her play another year of college basketball. And
where will she be playing college basketball, in your estimation?
So now we get into that part of it. Like, where is the best fit for Olivia Miles? Where might she go? I think a lot of times when I look at like these superstar transfers, a lot of times it usually comes back to who recruited you in high school and who did you have those best relationships with And do you remember those coaches, and do you still have those good relationships? I think about this a lot when, Diamond Johnson went into the portal from Rutgers, and Westmore at NC State recruited her really hard out of high school, and she came on down to NC State, and they went to an Elite Eight, and she was ACC Sixth Player of the Year, and it was really good that first year. Then not so good the second year, and then she goes to Norfolk State, where she's been awesome. That said, so the TCU stuff makes sense to me, because I was going back last night, looking a little bit back at Olivia Miles' high school recruitment, and Oregon was one of her finalists, and Mark Campbell was at Oregon when Olivia Miles was being recruited. And Mark Campbell now has a reputation for developing guards, making them better, and getting them ready for the WNBA, from Sabrina Ionescu to Haley Van Lith now having her career best season, under him. And maybe Olivia Miles sees that and goes, maybe that's where I need to play. Because I don't think Olivia Miles is necessarily a player that is going to sort of go to the highest bidder and is just in this to sort of secure the bag. She doesn't, as someone who has covered her over a couple of years, she doesn't really strike me as that type of person. I think she wants to win. I think she wants to develop and get ready for the W, and I think she wants to win. Going back to, looking back at her recruitment and stuff last night, I was reading the story on ESPN.com from 2020, where she had basically said, if Courtney Banghart had not left Princeton for North Carolina, she would have gone to Princeton. She was that fond of Courtney. She was, she's from New Jersey, was interested in, sort of the playing at home sort of thing. And Princeton was one of her finalists, and so was North Carolina. And I was then reminded, I went back into some of my interview notes from my time I spent with UNC, and talking to Courtney Banghart. And we were talking about why she left Princeton. And one of the big sticking points was her recruitment of Olivia Miles, because Olivia had basically told her, I would love to come here. I like you. I like Princeton, but I want to play in the Final Four, and I can't do that at Princeton. That's just the reality of it. As it turns out, never played in the Final Four at Notre Dame either. So I think if North Carolina is in the mix for this, I would not be surprised. I don't know if they are going to get her, but I wouldn't be surprised if TCU, which has already been reported and been out there, is a front runner for her. So I would look at TCU. I would look at North Carolina. I would look at a place like, if she did this, she can never step foot in South Bend again. But if you want to win a title, if you want to get ready for the W, there's a little place in Storrs, Connecticut called UConn. And you could go there next year, and you could step into Paige Bueckers' shoes, and you could play with AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong. And that sounds like a whole lot of fun if I'm Olivia Miles.
Would that make her the new HVL? Would that be the circle of life if she goes to UConn? Would that be the ultimate new Kevin Durant in the sport?
Yes. I think that would make her one of the villains of women's college basketball. But, it would be so much fun. I would be incredibly here for that.
So just to tie a couple things together, again, Mark Campbell was the longtime associate head coach at Oregon. Again, largely was quite simply a longtime assistant who happened to be very involved in the recruitment and the development of Sabrina Ionescu once upon a time. And now here we are. He's in his third year as the head coach at TCU, just took them to their first Final Four, just won their first conference and regular season tournament. And now he is out here mining the portal better than anybody, just so we're clear on that front. And it appears that the fruits of his labor from 4 or 5 years ago are now being paid off in the form potentially of Olivia Miles heading to Fort Worth. I bring all that up to say, I love your insight and your reporting, Mitch, boots on the ground in Birmingham, of that dynamic between Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles. Because don't forget, Sonia Cintron also saying goodbye to South Bend by all accounts. Because at this point in time, I don't know who's going to the WNBA, who's not, even though I know the deadline is on Tuesday, April 1st. Because also Flauja Johnson, which we'll get to that here in just a second, has an opportunity to also go to the W potentially. We will address that here in a second. Point being, for Niele Ivey to lose Olivia Miles, a pillar in her program longer than Hannah Hidalgo, if for no other reason than she's 2 years older, And if there was beef, and again, we don't want to throw that into the ether, but if it appeared there was a strained relationship, whether between the backcourt or between the head coach, the administration, and those two star players, what does that mean for Notre Dame, who we both picked to win it all? What does that mean for them long term?
I mean, the talk in Birmingham was just about how much of a disappointment this season was for Notre Dame. And this how this sort of era of Notre Dame basketball essentially finished up, because you're right, you don't have Olivia Miles is leaving by all accounts, Sonia Citron out of eligibility, Maddie Westbeld out of eligibility, Leah Tu King out of eligibility. So now you have coming back to you next season Hannah Hidalgo and Kate Koval.
And that's it.
Yeah. And so Notre Dame's going to have to do some work in the portal to put some pieces around Hannah Hidalgo. And yeah, I mean, it's, you look at the Olivia Miles era. I mean, like when she came onto the scene and then her true freshman season is paired up with Sonia Citron and Maddie Westbeld, and then Hannah Hidalgo is coming. The expectation was just that at some point Notre Dame was going to win a title. And to not even get past the Sweet 16 in the 4 years that you have Olivia Miles on campus is a massive disappointment and a massive underachievement. And I don't know where things exactly like went wrong for Notre Dame, but yeah, this is the 4th year in a row that they've lost in the Sweet 16. And Notre Dame is not a program that like hangs banners for making the Sweet 16. And so to have this era of Notre Dame basketball end, the Olivia Miles era, without anything to show for it, really, you did win the ACC title last year in the tournament in Greensboro. That is not a sequence of games that Olivia Miles played in, though, because she was hurt. You have one ACC tournament title to show for the entire Olivia Miles era. No Final Four, no national championship. It's a massive disappointment and underachievement for sure. I don't think Niele Ivey is like on the hot seat or anything. Like we don't need to go there. They are still winning a whole lot of games and recruiting very well and the whole thing. But yeah, it's a bummer to see this era of Notre Dame basketball in this way and for them to come up so empty in big moments.
I would like to also remind the audience that the new Full Court Press on ESPN comes out in May, and the 3 players who will be featured in that documentary, Kiki Iriafen of USC, Hannah Hidalgo of Notre Dame, and I'm going to call another audible, Mitch, LSU's Flau'jae Johnson seems like a logical segue for us here in number 2 of this week's starting 5. Again, not what the rundown says, but we're going to segue there because that's where the conversation has to go when talking about players with the decision faced in front of them of whether or not they should declare for the WNBA. Because part of me also looks at Olivia Miles' decision and wonders if the new CBA had to play a factor, knowing she could make more money in NIL one final season in college compared to what her rookie salary would look like in the W. Now Flau'jae Johnson also faced with a similar decision. Maybe we're going to get some breaking news in the next 25 minutes, 30 minutes as we're recording the rest of this podcast. I believe Flau'jae will go back to LSU, but the comments from Kim Mulkey in Spokane certainly spoke as if she is already gone.
Yeah, I do think that the CBA point that you brought up, I do think that was a big factor in Olivia Miles' decision to wait a season. I think it was also a big factor in AZ Flood's decision to wait a season and come back for an extra year. And we'll see what happens with Flau'jae Johnson. Just for the listeners real quick to kind of explain the WNBA is going to go through a round of CBA negotiations here very soon, and in all likelihood, that is going to increase the rookie salary scale for players who were drafted by the time the 2026 draft rolls around. So players are going to be able to make more money as rookies when they're drafted. So they're going to be able to make more money if they enter the 2026 draft than the 2025 draft. In short, that is the overall point. Now, that is not going to deter someone like Paige Bueckers from going into the draft, as was announced.
People did float that. Rebecca Lobo disputed it. May have been floated on this podcast as well.
Yes. And my friend Howard Megdal has done some reporting around that, and I think it was a thought for a while. But yeah, as was announced recently for I think like the 6th time this season, Paige Bueckers is indeed going into the WNBA draft.
And by all accounts, will be the number 1 overall pick, even if the projected number 2 overall pick is now staying in college, potentially for the same reasons that we thought Paige may stay.
Yes, absolutely. So Flage, real quick, just had statistically, basically the best season of her career, led LSU in scoring 18.6 points per game. I think though, if you're her and Olivia is not entering the draft, and you look at who else is entering the draft, there's a pretty good chance that Flage Johnson could be a top 5 pick.
I think she could go too.
Maybe
Knowing AZ Fudd's not going either.
Yeah.
Knowing what she did in the tournament, and I told you and producer Dimitri I would have a stunning realization to share on the program. Me, noted Kim Mulkey hater, since her days at Baylor, since her days of saying that Megan Gustafson was the little girl on the farm, I found myself rooting for Kim Mulkey and LSU because Flau'jae Johnson is a dog. Flau'jae Johnson has the heart of a champion. And while, yes, she maybe missed one too many bunnies that ultimately led to LSU's ouster, I don't think she's the reason that they lost that game on Sunday night.
No.
Because I think she's the reason they were still in the game in the final waning minutes of that one, where it would have been very easy, just as we were talking about Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles and Sonia Citron going 1 of 17 from the field. It would have been very easy for Flau'jae to pack it up, especially knowing Anissa Morrow was bruised and just gutting it out with the broken nose, but it's not broken. I just think that Flau'jae looked like to me, and again, I was not in Spokane, but it looked like to me she still had unfinished business to attend to. At the same time, to your point, I don't think her star will ever be higher than it is right now.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Flau'jae is a player who absolutely has that dog in her. I think she is an attractive prospect to WNBA people because she is a big guard. She's not a teeny tiny Haley Van Lith. She's even bigger than Olivia Miles. She's long. She can throw her body around in the paint, that sort of thing. But
I think she takes it to the rack. Like, I don't want to make a crazy comparison here, Mitch, but it's always floated that Kyrie Irving takes it to the hoop better than any guard in the NBA. I would make the argument that if only in college basketball, Flau'jae Johnson is as smooth going to the hoop as anybody in the sport in the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, she's got a smooth
finish.
That's
including Caitlin Clark, by the way, because that's one part of her game that she's been very vocal. She knows she has to grow the mid-range floater as well as actually guiding, navigating through traffic.
Yeah, and Flau'jae, to her credit, just made, a career best from 3-point range this season too. Shot 38.3%, 1.4 3-pointers per game. I think if she decides to go, she's a top 5 pick. I think that if she decides to come back to LSU, they're going to have to do some work in the portal, which it sounds like they are underway in trying to do that. I feel pretty, how do I want to phrase this? Use my therapy words here. I think I feel I know. I feel
it's trending towards that. Well, yes, trending.
I feel like there is a chance that Cody McMahon could end up at LSU. I feel pretty good about that.
But here's the thing: Cody McMahon, she's not Anissa Morrow.
That's fair. And so you need another big. Yeah.
So we go back to the argument of Haley Van Lith going to LSU. And we talk about the transfer portal at large. They were talking about this on the Eye on College Basketball men's podcast yesterday. The idea of John Shire went into the portal for Duke, and he identified 3 players that none of the other Blue recruiting, but he knew they were best for his program. And so I wonder, can you have someone like Cody McMahon, who's a bit of a hothead and has to have the ball in her hands, or at the very least needs to have the most points at the box score when everything's said and done, with Flaugier? Because then are you running into that same exact issue that you did with having too many lead guards, too many lead dogs with Angel Reese, Anissa Morrow, Flaugier Johnson, Haley Van Lith?
Yeah. We'll see. It's going to be an interesting offseason for LSU. Whether Flaugier stay or goes, it's going to be an interesting, because it's like, okay, are you hitting the reset button on, just simply rebuilding after, the Flaugier era, and you're trying to rebuild it around Michaela Williams? Or are you putting pieces around Flaugier to make one more run at the Final Four in what would be her last season of eligibility? So we'll probably get a decision from Flaugier. I think, that deadline is coming up. I think if you are a player who played in an Elite Eight game, you have 48 hours to decide about, from the moment that game ends, to decide if you're going to enter the WNBA draft or not. So we're coming up here on that deadline as we talk here Tuesday, April 1st.
Let's keep it moving with the rest of this week's starting five. We had to get to those two storylines. I think, in my estimation, two of the biggest storylines in the entire sport, because it affects both the W and the college ranks. But Mitch, you have a little diatribe of your own that you need to go on, and it involves Duke head coach Kara Lawson. You were texting myself and producer Dimitri in real time. You have questions about the head coach of the Blue Devils and her decision-making in that fourth quarter.
Oh, boy.
You were there. You could have knocked off South Carolina, Kara, and what did you do? In
real time, I was just like, what is going on? What is happening right now? What is she doing? What are we doing here? To set the stage for everybody, there's 29 seconds left in an Elite Eight game. Duke's first Elite Eight game since 2013. It is 54-52. South Carolina is up by 2 points. Duke has just drawn a charge on an inbounds play. And so, basically drawing a charge in only a way that Duke can to get the ball back. There's a timeout called after that charge is drawn. There's 29 seconds left. Duke has the ball, down 2 points. In the huddle, as they're meeting, I see Taina Mare run to the scorer's table to check in. And then I see the huddle breaks, and I don't see Toby Fournier come back onto the floor. Toby Fournier was the best offensive player on the floor in this absolute rock fight of a game. She scored 18 points, more than anyone else who played in this game, Duke or South Carolina. She was getting to the rim with a lot of success, which is not something that a lot of people can say against South Carolina's front line. I mean, she was really eating them up in the pick and roll. Someone asked Sanaya Fagan after the game and was like, were you surprised that Toby Fournier wasn't on the floor for that last meaningful possession from Duke? And she was like, yeah, she was killing us. So the possession goes on. Taina Mare's on the floor. Toby Fournier is not, inexplicably for some reason. And Duke does what it tries to do. They're dribbling the ball around. Clock's ticking down. We get down to about the 7-second mark, and we get a 3-point shot from Ashlyn Jackson that misses the mark by a pretty wide margin. And I don't get it. I absolutely don't get it. I thought it was an absolutely baffling decision by Kara Lawson. I think it's one she's probably going to be thinking about for a while. And after the game, Toby Fournier said all the right things and was like, I trust Coach Kara, and she put me in this position, to be successful and have a great year, and blah, 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 blah. Look, man, you didn't give yourself a chance to win. You took out your best player. What are you doing? I don't get it. And even if you wanted the ball in Ashlyn Jackson's hands and you wanted her to sort of make the decision to either shoot it or pass it or whatever it is, why not have Toby Fournier out there as a decoy? Again, like Sanaya Fagan said, she'd been killing them. Again, 18 points, more than anyone else, having a lot of success in the pick and roll. You could have rolled, ran a couple. There was 29 seconds left. You could have ran a couple pick and rolls.
Hold the ball.
Right.
You can run the clock down.
You could have ran like 3 screens with Toby Fournier to try to get her a good look at the rim. Like, you had time to try different things. It didn't just need to end with a 3-pointer from Ashlyn Jackson. You had time to figure this out. And
Two men's comps here, Mitch. For those of our listeners who were also watching that tournament, this is not an RJ Lewis situation with Rick Pitino. This is not a matter of Rick Pitino sat his best player because he didn't like the effort from his best player. This was just pure personnel mismanagement by Kara Lawson. I would invite the Florida Gators into the conversation, because when they came back to defeat Texas Tech and do the unthinkable in the Elite Eight on the men's side, what did Todd Golden do on that final possession? He brought in 3 bigs to just basically clog up the paint and force Texas Tech to shoot a 3. Obviously, this is on the other side of the floor. This is on the offensive side of the ball for Duke, but the point still holds. By bringing in all those bodies, Todd Golden created a decoy. Yeah. And created a mismatch. There was no creativity. It was just, let's run the clock down and chuck up a 3. And for me, that's disappointing, because I do hold Kara Lawson, and I know people who I trust in all sports, including I've heard from some people in the NFL ranks who they think Kara Lawson's one of the best coaches in college sports, let alone women's college basketball. And it was just disappointing to see the final 30 seconds. She fell victim to what so many college football coaches, and also Raheem Morris, fall victim to each and every football season.
Yeah, I think she's a good coach too. And, you know, has had a lot of success this season, won the ACC title, got Duke to the Elite Eight. But, man, you had South Carolina cornered. Like, you had them. And then, you know, you did that. Like, that's how you finished the game. I really thought it was just a baffling decision. Like, coming off the floor, I'm, like, talking to people like, can you believe what just happened? That is what we ended the game with. And, you know, we asked Kara about it after the game, and she just said it was a coach's decision. Sure was, and it was a bad one too. Sure was a coach's decision, not a good one. Yeah, so Toby Fournier, your leading scorer all season, 18 points against South Carolina, the leading scorer of the game, not on the bench for arguably the most important possession of the game. So good job, Duke.
Let's pivot to happier thoughts. As much as we have declared HVL, Haley Van Lith, are her of the week, Miss March, as much as Flau'jae Johnson and Olivia Miles and their decisions have been the storyline over the last 72 hours in women's basketball, you believe, Mitch, that there were 2 other stars who we need to pay homage to here in this, following the second weekend of the NCAA tournament and as we look to the Final Four. And those 2 players are
Lauren Betts and Paige Bueckers, who I think go into the Final Four this weekend as the 2 remaining best players in the tournament. And as it turns out, they're going to play against each other, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. Just real quick, we can kind of make this quick here on both of them, but Paige Bueckers, a combined 71 points in Sweet 16 and Elite 8 wins this past weekend for UConn. I mean, really, really powering the Huskies and stepping up in these big moments. I really think that, like, she is super, super motivated to win a national championship this year for UConn, which would end Gino Ariema's very, very long title drought of 9 years.
It's very sad. They've been so maligned in stores, right? And Gamble Pavilion, they're all just so sad. Everyone's so sad.
But if Paige Bueckers, here's one thing, like, if she doesn't win a title this year, she goes down as probably the best UConn player ever to not win a title. And if you're Paige Bueckers, that is not a club you really want to be a part of. You want to be a part of the Sue Birds and the Diana Taurasi's and the Rebecca Lobos and the Brianna Stewarts and the Maya Moores and the Tina Charleses of the world. You want to go out with a chip. It seemed to me, this past weekend in Spokane, she was very motivated to get that done. Switching gears real quick to UCLA, I have to apologize to the Bruins because I have not been a believer in you for much of the season. I have said that I don't think you got that dog in you, and you showed me.
Co-sign, by the way.
You showed me in Spokane that you maybe perhaps do have that dog in you, and you do have the ability to get it done. So UCLA in the Final Four for the first time ever. behind, I mean, two really good games from Lauren Betts. In that Elite Eight game against LSU, she has 17 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 blocks. Really just patrolled and owned the paint and did not let Anissa Morrow really have a big impact on the game. I thought she was just really effective. And then against Ole Miss, just no big deal, casually dropping 31 points and 10 rebounds against the fighting CoachYos down there in Oxford, Mississippi. So yeah, I mean, just really great performance from Lauren Betts, really great performance from Paige Bueckers. And yeah, I think that is going to be the best game in the national semifinals, because I have a pretty good idea of how the other game is going to go, because it's Dawn Staley versus Vic Schaefer, and we know how those games go.
We will preview those games coming up, but before we do, let's round out this week's starting five with a quick check-in on the coaching carousel. It's still spinning in women's basketball, maybe not quite as much as the men's side and Mitch's beloved home state, Maryland Terrapins, which we will save for last call. We will go after Kevin Willard because regardless if you're a women's or men's or both college basketball fan, there are things that need to be said. What other updates do you have for us in other locales around the country?
Yeah, so I mean, the coaching carousel sort of stopped spinning a little bit, like last week when we had those SEC jobs get filled, and then we did have Florida Gulf Coast open, and that's still open as of now. But really, for the most part, a lot of the Power Four stuff had kind of taken a pause. Wisconsin got filled by former Missouri coach Robin Pinkton, which was a incredibly underwhelming hire, I thought. BYU gets filled by Lee Cummard, who is a former men's player and who was on the women's staff for the past, since 2018. But BYU dealing with a bit of a limited candidate pool there because of some of the let's not say requirements, but sort of guidelines that it takes to be a coach at BYU. But then this past weekend, over the last couple of days here, we had Doug Bruno retire from DePaul after, I think, nearly 40 years leading that program. We had SMU's new AD, who is from Maryland, who basically kind of got kicked out the door a little bit by Kevin Willard along the way. He comes into SMU. There's going to be a Kevin Willard.
Even when I tried to push it to last call, there was always going to be a Kevin Willard reference.
Yeah. And so he comes into SMU, and the first thing he does is he fires Toyo Wilson, who had been there for 4 years, but had not really sort of had any success whatsoever. So SMU is now open. And then yesterday on Monday, Nell Fortner announces her retirement from Georgia Tech. So now you have 3 sort of like high profile openings, 2 in the Power Four and 1 in the Big East. The DePaul opening is interesting because this is a school, they're in the Big East. They do not play FBS football. They have a history of success in women's basketball under Doug Bruno. And I think a lot of people are viewing this as a really good job. A lot of people like DePaul's AD. They know that this is a place that is going to support women's basketball. I think DePaul has kind of quietly been saying behind the scenes that they plan to take some rev share money and put that towards women's college basketball. So, there's been a couple stories written about this recently, on the men's side, that these Big East jobs are going to be more attractive in the rev share era because they do not require taking a piece of the pie from football. Like all these Power Four schools, when it comes to the house settlement money, the biggest piece of the pie is going to go towards football, and then men's basketball, and then maybe if you're a school that really cares about women's basketball is getting that third piece of the pie. If you're a South Carolina or an LSU or a North Carolina or something like that, you're getting the third piece of the pie for women's basketball. At a place like DePaul or really any other school in the Big East, men's basketball is going to get the biggest piece of the pie, and then women's basketball is probably second. So SMU is another really interesting job that's open, I think, because as we have learned, as SMU has joined the ACC, SMU is ready to play in the big sandbox, and they have a lot of money. We just saw them make the college football playoff in football with a lot of transfer portal players. We saw their volleyball team get some investment in terms of NIL money and that sort of thing, and have a really great season where they were top 10, and, they extended their head coach, gave her a contract extension. So I think that SMU is a school with really deep pockets that is willing to invest in other sports that are not just football. And I think there's a chance here that they take a really big swing. And so that way that they can get competitive in women's college basketball. They don't have a ton of history in this sport. They haven't been to an NCAA tournament since 2008. All of their previous 7 NCAA tournament appearances happened under a former head coach, Rhonda Rompola, who retired in 2016. At the top of the list here is Karen Blair, who worked with Damon Evans, the former Maryland AD at Maryland. Karen Blair has been a longtime assistant coach, has been the associate head coach for BrendaFreese for the past few years. And this would be, not a big splashy home run swing sort of hire, but one that kind of checks a lot of the boxes in that she has this relationship with Damon Evans. And also, she played at SMU and was an assistant coach there for a long time. So this would be sort of a mama calling situation. And, they might put some resources around her in terms of that NIL rev share investment. Now, if SMU wants to really open up the checkbook and take some other bigger swings, I think there's a chance that they could call someone like Mark Kellogg at West Virginia, who has a buyout of about $1 million. It's basically 50% of whatever's left on his remaining base salary. But he's someone with deep Texas ties, who has shown that he can win at the Power 4 level, taking West Virginia to back-to-back tournaments. And I believe he's won 50 games there combined over the past 2 seasons. They could also do something like call Jeff Mittie, who was pursued by Missouri, who has coached at TCU in the past, so he knows that Texas landscape a little bit, has been at Kansas State for a while, but has had a bit of a wandering eye, shall we say. Or, they could go hire somebody like Christy Curry from Alabama, who has just taken Alabama to their 4th NCAA tournament appearance in 5 years. And by the way, according to USA Today's coaching salary database, is the lowest paid head coach in the SEC. So I think Alabama is going to have to fix that at some point, and pony up a little bit for Christy Curry, because she's had a lot of success there. Or maybe somebody like SMU will say, hey, we got a bag over here. Georgia Tech, I still need to do some more recon on. Kind of a weird opening because of all the sort of Georgia Tech of it all, the sort of just restraints that go into
kind of like the guidelines with BYU. There's guidelines for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, just sort of the restraints that go into, trying to run a successful sports program at Georgia Tech. Like, there's a lot of hurdles in terms of, like, it's a hard school to get into, unless you're an engineer. And so, I'm interested to see what kind of hire they make. I think it's possible that they could turn to someone that maybe is in the Ivy League right now and having some success. Georgia Tech also doesn't have a whole lot of NIL rev share stuff going on. But Nell Fortner certainly leaves that place better than she found it. I thought for a long time that her successor was going to be Blanche Alverson, who has since taken over the past couple of weeks the head coaching opening at San Diego. So she's grown across the country, and then Nell Fortner retires, and now you have an opening and really no front runner logical successor at the moment to fill that. So 2 openings now in the ACC, and we'll see what happens with the rest of this carousel cycle.
As the carousel continues to spin, we do have a final for Texas, South Carolina, UConn, UCLA. We know you're going to be locked in on that, so we're not even going to put that in Chef's Table. We're going to put that making money with Mitch. But before we get to those betting lines, Mitch, there is one other game on the calendar that you want to make sure the folks are listening and watching.
Yeah, I believe this is the 2nd annual Women's College All-Star Game. That's happening this Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. They did this last year in Cleveland. They're going to do it again here in Tampa. I believe it's being played at some community college there in Tampa. But, the venue doesn't really matter. I think you're just tuning in to see, some of your favorite players one last time. And really what this is sort of a chance for these players, the way that like it was sort of positioned last year was like these players getting a chance really to shine one more time in game action in front of WNBA scouts. So I don't think you're going to have like your really high profile players who are like definitely 100% sure going to get drafted. But, you see some of the names of the participants that are starting to leak out a little bit. And you'll see an Alyssa Utby from North Carolina, a Lucy Olson from Iowa, a Harmony Turner from Harvard. So there are going to be really good players in this game playing some fun basketball. I believe last year the coaches in this game were like Nancy Lieberman and Cheryl Miller. And so I think like there's some sort of celebrity coaching happening again this season. So that'll be fun to watch too. See Cheryl Miller coach and all that good stuff. But tune into that. That's Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. I'm going to try to get out to that in Tampa in person.
I believe it's at Hillsborough Community College. So if you are listening in the Tampa area, maybe you want to check that one out on Saturday afternoon, which of course will follow the Final Four on Friday evening at Amalie Arena. Mitch, you're playing spreads with this week's Making Money with Mitch. You're feeling a bit frisky, I think, after that 3-0 week last week, 26-23 on the season. Who are your picks for this year's Final Four?
Yes. Shout out to North Carolina and Duke for, really hitting the under in a big way.
It is the new, by the way, North Carolina Duke total is the new Iowa football total. I have decided. Like, it is the new guarantee.
I was going to say it's the new Army Navy. Like, you always bet the under in the Army Navy game. Now it's North Carolina Duke women's basketball. You always bet the under. Safely secured that. Neither team cracked 50 points. So bravo to both of them for giving us an absolute rock fight in Birmingham. And then Maryland, my sweet Terrapins, they covered against the Gamecocks, which was awesome to see as well. So we had a 3-0 week, which was a lot of fun. So at the Final Four in Tampa, looked at the lines last night. These were our initial lines immediately after the Elite Eight games ended. So this opened South Carolina versus Texas, opened at South Carolina -4.5. I have a pretty good feeling that South Carolina is not only going to win this game, but it win it by at least 5 points. As I said earlier, we know how this game is going to go, right? Like, this is Dawn Staley versus Vic Schaefer, and Dawn Staley has a history of beating Vic Schaefer, not only just overall, but especially in the postseason. Just here's a stat for you. Teams coached by Vic Schaefer, 4 and 15 all time against teams coached by Dawn Staley. So not a great winning percentage there for the fighting Vic Schaefers against teams coached by Dawn Staley. So I like South Carolina to cover 4.5, even though they have played in some tight games recently. I think that they will right the ship here and beat Texas comfortably.
And I just can't help but feel bad for all of the national pundits, all of the casual basketball fans who have fallen in love with Madison Booker this postseason. And now you're just going to have to accept the fact that it's Dawn Staley's world. We're just living in it, even in a year in which she has not had that dominant post, even in a year in which we don't know who the best player is on the team, because I've continued to make the argument it's Malaysia Fulwiley, and she's still coming off the bench. And yet here we are in a world in which Dawn Staley still somehow, some way could go back to her second straight national championship game appearance.
Yes, I would pencil South Carolina in for the national title just because I just don't believe in Texas's ability to beat them on this stage. Certainly, they lost to South Carolina.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Texas is 1-2 against South Carolina this season. Their only win was in Austin, Texas, by, I believe, 3 points. And this game is not being played in Austin, Texas. It's being played in Tampa, Florida. And I just don't see South Carolina slipping up against the Longhorns.
And those Gamecock fans, they do travel all the way down to Tampa Bay. You also are rolling with UConn because our doubt of UCLA continues, even if we did apologize to the Bruins earlier in the program.
Yes. So I'm taking, I do think that your national championship game is going to be UConn versus South Carolina. However, this game, UConn versus UCLA, the line opened at UConn favored by 8.5 points. I think it's going to be a lot closer than that. I think UConn is going to have trouble with Lauren Betts. So I'm going to take UCLA to cover 8.5 points. I just think, I look at UConn's roster and their biggest player is Jana Alafi, who's 6'5". But like, if I'm Lauren Betts, am I really supposed to be intimidated by Jana Alafi? No, not really. And then the next best forward. I mean, the best forward on UConn's roster is Sarah Strong, but she's only 6'2", and I'm Lauren Betts. I got 5 inches on her. Also, I'm Lauren Betts, and I've been playing really, really, really well lately. Lauren Betts, over her last 7 games, I looked this up last night, 21.2 points, 8.7 rebounds, 3.1 assists, 3.7 blocks per game. UCLA 7-0 in those games, have not lost in the month of March this year. So we now turn to April, but I think that Lauren Betts is going to keep this thing rolling, and I like them to cover 8.5 against UConn. Will they beat UConn? I don't know. I don't think so. I think this is a case where one team has Paige Bueckers and the others does not. And I think that's going to propel UConn into the national championship. And if you put a gun to my head and ask me to pick a national title winner right now, I would tell you it is UConn.
I would agree with that sentiment. And I think that it stems from both the men's and the women's tournament. What do we always talk about? Veteran guard play. And that is what UConn has. And quite frankly, UCLA's guard play. We apologize to you, Bruins fans. We apologize to Lauren Betts. I'm still not going to apologize, though, to a backcourt that was bailed out by a player who didn't register a point, I don't think, in 16 minutes in the Sweet 16. And then all of a sudden, lights out from 3 for multiple Bruins. Like, I don't think that that is sustainable. I do think, and I would like to apologize to Gabriela Jaquez because, number
awesome.
one, I know your game because I know your brother's game, and I defended your brother at every tooth and nail on the men's side because I believe that Jaime Jaquez had that dog in him. I believed he would transcend to the NBA, which he did, finishing 4th in Rookie of the Year odds, despite coming off the bench for the Miami Heat, Rookie of the Year voting, excuse me. And so, yeah, I should have known better with the Jaquez family. And, like, she's so cool, calm, and collected. I still have questions about Kiki Rice just because the turnovers continue. I think she thinks that she's Gabriella and she's not. And that's kind of the weird world that we're living in, that the second most high-profile name on that roster is not living up to the billing, but because she has Lauren Betts on her team, she's in the Final Four.
Yeah, I think we're about to see we're about to find out how good Kiki Rice is, because you're going to have to go mano a mano on pretty much every possession with either Paige Bueckers or AZ Fudd. And we're about to see what that's about.
Have fun with that. Speaking of fun, last call is here. It's time for our closeouts, shout-outs, plugs that we may have missed. I would like to note that I dropped the ball in not going to the owners' meetings this week for the National Football League in Palm Beach because Caitlin Clark was there with Serena Williams, and I hope that the video is somehow shared at some point on the internet of that wonderful conversation they had about women and the NFL and the dynamic that exists in women's sports. So shout out Caitlin. We can't let a podcast go by. We don't give CC a shout out. Mitch, as a reminder, part of why he is in a hotel room right now, he's in Birmingham. He will be making his way to Tampa. I appreciated Nicole Auerbach, who's going to be covering the Final Four for SiriusXM, tweeting out her plea. I don't know if you saw this, Mitch, for restaurant recommendations. So all I will give you as far as recommendations for your time in Tampa is go to St. Pete, because the last time the Final Four was in Tampa was in 2019. Mm-hmm. And that vibe in St. Pete is completely different. I was there in 2019 that summer, and it looks like a different place. I think St. Pete is amazing. Make sure you go to Goodnight John Boy, whether it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon or it's 2 a.m., because it is my favorite bar in the state of Florida, because it has a disco floor and they only play like disco music, and the drinks are really good. The food, I don't even know if there is food, but it's a really cool spot. So make sure you travel over to St. Pete if you are going to the Final Four.
Yeah, I think our friend Jose Fernandez, the coach of the USF
Hmm.
Bulls, I believe he tweeted out some graphics with
Oh, they are ready. The Bulls are ready to welcome you
some
to Tampa.
recommendations on restaurants and things to do and stuff like that. So I have both of those tweets bookmarked. So hopefully I can catch up with Jose at some point and yeah, check out some of the food and drinks that Tampa has to offer. I was there in 2019 and like I don't the only place I really remember going to, I'm gonna have to try and find this place again. It was within walking distance between my hotel and the arena, and it was like a hockey themed bar, big
Mhm.
Tampa Bay Lightning spot. And they had really, really great wings. I mean, some of the best wings I've had in my life. So I'm gonna try and find that place again and get some wings at some point. But yeah, I'm here for all your Tampa Recs. Shoot me a tweet, whatever. Holler at your boy.
You had great barbecue in Alabama, now great wings in
I
Tampa
did.
town.
Shout out to Full Moon.
Love it. Love it. Speaking of moon, speaking of the world, we are the world, thanks to Kim Mulkey. I would like to credit Alex Grant of the Carolina Panthers in the weirdest twist of fate, the Carolina Panthers creative team, for one of the best tweets that we've had on the internet this year. Look, Kim is always going to have absurd outfits. This one, the comp to the Michael Jackson outfit from the We Are the World music video, it tops them all. I appreciated Holly Rowe trying to have fun with Kim and ask about the state flower on her sleeve. Kim Mulkey will have none of that. She doesn't want to talk about her outfits, even though she is the main character. As much as we said that the main character of March has been Haley Van Lith, we know that her former coach is still priding herself, that we are all still focused on her, even though her team is bowed out of the tournament.
Absolutely, yeah. Also, just a point about Kim Mulkey, because I saw a lot of people like jumping on her, and like there was the Stephen A. Smith of it all and everything else. Like, if you watch that full clip of her interaction with the reporter, it was very clear that like they were both joking with each other, and I thought it was very funny how she was like, "How many Final Fours you played in?" I love that. That was great. Kim Mulkey is a very complex and multi-layered character who has a lot of different viewpoints about a lot of different things. There are a lot of people who love Kim Mulkey and a lot of people who hate her. I just like when I saw the clip of Stephen A. Smith, just like Kim Mulkey is very, very rude. It's like, you know who I don't give a damn about their opinion about Kim Mulkey? Stephen A. Smith. Anything that Stephen A. Smith says about women's college basketball, I don't care. I don't care whatsoever. I
And
like
meanwhile, by the way, you've got Iowa fans who their biggest argument in life now that they've secured Ben McCollum's services is the idea of Kim Mulkey being on the floor during a play and screaming that the ball was last touched by the opponent. And like they've been like turning it into the anime Transformer, the Grok, whatever that like they're all just upset that Kim was on the court, the refs leave her on the court. They never it's called working the refs, unfortunately, and it
Kim
happens.
Mulkey.
It is what it is.
Kim Mulkey do be on the court a lot. She went to the Mike Tomlin school of stepping on the field. There's a men's coach that used to just be all over the damn court all the damn time. But Kim Mulkey has certainly transcended that at this point. She knows no bounds. She is all over the court at all times. And Dawn Staley is beginning to reach into that territory as well. At the end of the first quarter of the Duke South Carolina game, first quarter buzzer goes off. Dawn walks to the middle of the court, waving her rolled up paper at the refs, meeting the refs in the middle of the court to tell them something. She is absolutely, she's gone, I think, to the Coach K school of working the refs and making them a little bit intimidated by you. And I think that's what we've been seeing a little bit lately from Dawn.
As speaking of characters, I would be remiss if I didn't mention another character that counts in March, and that is Jalen Suggs and Haley Van Lithstad, the bromance that I don't think America knew they needed. Epic celebrations in the stands, the chest bumps. Also, if the world didn't know that they were dating, evidently they are. Also, doesn't Jalen Suggs have an NBA season? I know he's hurt, but I also appreciate him supporting HVL. But yeah, one of the better, more viral moments on the women's side that we've gotten this month. Let's wrap it up a bit here, Mitch, because I know we're pressed for time. Shout out CoachYo. I know that Mitch doubted her, but I mean, doing things that they haven't seen in Oxford in quite some time.
Yeah.
I love CoachYo, former head coach at JU. I love the energy. She's very online. But listen, someone needs to challenge Kim Mulkey for the main character. Someone needs to challenge Dawn Staley for being the people's champion. So I appreciate CoachYo's efforts.
My least favorite thing, well, I don't know my total least favorite, but one of my least favorite things of the weekend was looking at one of the transcripts from one of the Ole Miss press conferences, and Coach Yo, unprompted, sort of doubling down on why she hired Quentin Hillsman as an assistant coach, because she wants to build a championship culture. And Quentin Hillsman, once upon a time, like tripped and fell into the Final Four with a Syracuse squad that got beat by UConn pretty handedly, I believe. And so that's why she hired Quentin Hillsman, apparently. And
maybe she's trying to prop him up for the SMU job. Just not checkers. Just not checkers. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Speaking of coaches, though, that we both can agree on, finally, Kevin Willard sucks. BrendaFreese is the best. Producer Dimitri wants us to print the shirts, have BrendaFreese coach both the Maryland men's and Maryland women's sides. Given that there's no athletic director currently in College Park, honestly, wouldn't be the worst case scenario if you're a Terps fan. I think you would sign up for Brenda to just coach both teams, or at the very least be the shadow president of the men's program.
Make BrendaFreese the athletic director, I think is what I would say. And
maybe that's how you keep her assistants because from higher paying jobs and from head coaching jobs, by just elevating Brenda to athletic director and like head coach emeritus, and then you have someone else run the day to day.
Cheyenne Sellers to coach the men's basketball team. I think that's what we should have.
Mitch, where will we be able to find your coverage from the Final Four in Tampa this week?
Yeah, all over at SBNation.com, where I've been writing from Birmingham. I wrote about the opening at DePaul. I wrote about Haley Van Lith's redemption tour. I wrote about how Dawn Staley's South Carolina is inevitable in March. I wrote about the SMU opening. Last night from the Texas TCU game, I wrote about Kyla Oldecare's impact and how she sort of turned into the Sononia Prince stopper. So, yeah, I'm all over there at SB Nation, on Twitter at Primetime Mitch. You can follow me there and check out my work.
I haven't plugged him yet, so I do want to note that my boyfriend Kevin, reoccurring character on this program, also a son of Maryland, does have a perfect Elite Eight and a perfect Final Four, and he loves Kyla Oldacre. He just kept saying, like, oh my God, can she play for the Jaguars? Because I think she would be really good. So
her, just real quick, her interception of Haley Van Lith last night, like that inbounds pass, and then she took it coast to coast, like racing, sort of lumbering towards the rim with Sononia Prince. It just kind of reminded me of, like, you know, like when a like a defensive end gets an interception and like there's a cornerback like tugging at him, like, no, give the ball to me, like James Harrison in the Super Bowl, you know, against the Arizona Cardinals, and they're just like, no, I got this, I'm going all the way. And like she does that Euro step and like puts it up, and that bench goes wild. It was like the moment of the game. It was fantastic. I loved it so much.
Let's get you on the road to Tampa, Mitch. He's leaving Birmingham. He's making his way to the Final Four. Follow along for all the coverage. And, of course, we will have you up to date here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. He's Mitch. I'm Mia. We will catch you next week.
Deuces.